Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Every so often, a fan of this podcast will throw out a name. You should record an episode with... And this is one of those shows. Barry Dale has not been part of the music scene in Kingston, Ontario for over 20 years. As a matter of fact, it took a little time to track him down. With a little help from one of his good friends, we found a YouTube video of him performing with a swing band in Arizona. And that's where he has been since he left Kingston. A generation of fans may know Barry by his alter ego, Harr-i-gan, the friendly Irish leprechaun that hosted a children's show syndicated to TV stations across the country back in the 70s and 80s. From the early days as a teenager singing with big bands in Ottawa and Montreal, he has come full circle to do the same thing down in Sun City and Scottsdale. Oh yeah, and there's making pizza somewhere in there as well. Here is my conversation with Barry Dale, recorded over the phone from his home in Arizona in early September 2023. Barry, welcome to the Kingstonian Podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Dave.
Now, when I mentioned to a few people that I was going to be having this conversation with you, you know what came out of their mouth right away, don't you?
Harrigan, Harrigan.
Exactly. That short, wee little iconic lyric has made a lasting impression, hasn't it?
Yes, I think so.
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But let's begin with the early days, because you were from Montreal. And was music something that you always wanted to get into? How did you get into music to start with?
Well, first of all, my father was a lifelong musician. He was a famous violinist, and he had his own orchestra in Montreal. And matter of fact, the nightclub that he was the orchestra leader in, immediately after he left, a new owner came in, and Maynard Ferguson was the first band.
Oh, okay.
Maynard was 14 years old at the time, and he used to play exactly like Harry James.
Okay.
Yeah. So just a little bit of history there.
That goes way back.
Oh, yeah.
So when you actually got into performing, you were performing in clubs as well?
Well, when I first started performing, I started going down. My father never wanted me to be in show business. He said, it's not for you. It's a very tough business, and you're more of a gentle person. I said, well, anyway. So he died at a very early age. He was 43, and I was 17, and I said, I'm going into show business because I want to sing. Yeah. And so I would go downtown Montreal to the, what the heck was the name of the club? The Downbeat.
Okay.
And one of his very close friends was the band leader there, and I went up, introduced myself, and I'd hang around with the musicians, and after a while, he said, come on up and sing a song, and that's when I started singing. So, but that was just amateur time.
And that was when? And that was when?
Oh, geez, you really want me to try and remember how back then?
I was
17, so okay. You figure it out, Dave.
Now, when I was doing some flipping through Google and various websites and looking for information about you, I found an album jacket, and it was labeled as Barry Dale and his Dixieland Group in 1963.
Yeah, that was called Dixieland au Québec.
And now, how did you get into Dixieland? Or is that something you had an affinity for to start with?
Well, I always played kind of Dixieland on clarinet, so that's how I got into that. Yeah,
okay.
But it was a French album, and I ended up singing 2 French songs on it. So that album never went anywhere, by the way.
It didn't sell 1 million copies or anything.
No, it didn't sell 7. I don't think
7. Just family and friends.
Yeah, something like that.
Now, at some particular point, you made your way to Ottawa. Now, was that to get involved in television, or was there another reason?
Well, Ottawa. No, what happened in Ottawa? It was the Gatineau Club in Ottawa at the time was a very famous nightclub worldwide. And they used to bring big name stars in there. And as a matter of fact, they brought my father's orchestra in from Montreal for the grand opening, and he was there for almost a year.
Okay.
And later on, when I reached working age, my agent in Montreal said, Joe Sachs needs a singer. I said, oh. He said, why don't you drive down and see him? So my friend and I drove down. We talked to him, and he booked me in there. And the first time I worked there was a huge old barn kind of nightclub.
Okay.
But they had a chorus line, and it was show business. And so the first star I worked with, I walked on stage with Dorothy Lamour.
Okay.
And that was my introduction to Ottawa. And I went back there to the Gatineau Club for many, many, many years. And the orchestra leader at that time was Champ Champagne. Champ was the guy that did all the music for Galloping Gourmet.
Oh,
and
right.
At the time, yeah, and he was a young guy then too, and he was doing work with CBC. He was a fantastic musician, amazing piano player and bass player, and whatever he played, he was fabulous. So I went on and started to do shows with that, and that carried on, and I did shows with CBC radio for about 35 years.
Now, would this be when you first went to Ottawa? Would this be in the 60s or early?
I think it was in the late 50s.
Okay. So the big bands were still very popular right back then.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So as you moved into the 1960s, when we had all those bands come over from Britain, what kind of impact would it have had on your bread and butter?
Well, actually none, because I was in nightclubs, and those bands didn't make much of a difference to me. I would go and see them at like Jazz at the Philharmonic and things like that. And but other than that, the nightclubs, especially in Montreal was its own world of nightclubs. It was like a little Paris, and you worked week to week, and there were about 150 nightclubs in Montreal proper, and
really
worked all the nightclubs. Oh yeah. It was wonderful. You didn't make a lot of money, but you worked all the time.
Now, when you went on stage and did a set, how long at a set would you have done back then?
Well, it wasn't in those days. In nightclubs, you didn't do sets; you did an act.
Okay.
So you'd come on. I was usually the master of ceremony, so I would come on, open with a song, bring on the first act, and then bring on the second act, bring on the third act. And depending where you're working, there were 3 or 4 acts, and you fit in somewhere with your act in the middle, and then you bring on the closer.
Okay.
But in a place like in Ottawa at the Gatineau, where they had chorus girls and a whole line of numbers, I would sing with the line of girls, and we would do our musical numbers that way, and bring on the stars, whoever they were at that time.
And what kind of songs would you be singing way back then?
I sang all the songs of the day.
Yeah.
Mostly Sinatra.
Right.
Because he was the biggest thing at that time. So
you can't go wrong with Sinatra.
Yeah. No, you can't. No.
Now let's move into television a little bit and how you got involved with Harrigan, which I believe started in Ottawa.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
I started at CJAI.
Right.
Matter of fact, I was brought to CJAI. Champ called me one night, and he said, we're doing a show after the news. It was in the summer. And he said, you want to come do it? I said, sure. So I drove from Montreal, and I went in. We did the show. We did so many things without any rehearsals even. So we did that half-hour show. And at that time, I met a man there who had just taken over the head of production at CJAI, and his name was Lorne Freed.
Right. I know that name.
So, I'm sure you do. And so I met Lorne, and we became instant friends. And after I did the show, he said, "You got it." I said, "I got what?" He said, "You didn't realize that was an audition." I said, "You're kidding." Anyway, it turned out that I got a 5-day-a-week daytime show, an hour show.
Right.
With we had a crew. We had an ensemble of people. We had another girl singer. We had comedians, and Bill Luxton, who originally started in Kingston, was on the show too. So it was really a fun show with a band and live audience, and that's how I started in actually working full time in television.
So that's a whole different world from these days when you look at what's going on in local TV stations.
In local TV station, they don't do any production at all anymore.
No, they don't.
No.
So why did you gravitate towards a children's program? How did that evolve?
Well, that was funny. One of the producers said, "Would you come on?" She was doing a daily, 5-day-a-week show for little, very young children. And she said, "Would you come on and sing? It's going to be St. Patrick's Day. Would you come on and sing some Irish songs?" I said, "Sure." So they dressed me up in an Irish sort of outfit, and I sang a bunch of Irish songs. And she immediately said, "Could you do 2 or 3 more shows like that?" I said, "Sure." So we did a bunch of them, and then after that, it's just someone asked me. The head of the station said, "Why don't you do a show? We need Canadian content. So why don't you do a show with Bill Luxton, and you could sit in your costume and just introduce cartoons?"
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't too fond of that. But there was a new production manager at that time, and he said, "Forget that crap." He said, "We're going to do something different." And that's how Harrigan came in. Bill Swafield was a director at that time, and he's the guy that, Bill was a wonderful guy. He's the guy that actually created the Galloping Gourmet. He built the sets, he built the whole program, the whole format and everything. And Bill said, I know what we're gonna do. And so that's when it all happened. It all came together. And so we started to put together that show, and that's how it happened.
I imagine it was great fun working with a guy like him who had all of this creative energy and knew exactly where he wanted to take something.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it was great. It was just wonderful.
You mentioned Galloping Gourmet, and I am trying to remember the guy's name. I remember watching the show. He's the guy that always drank wine while he was cooking, right?
Oh, yeah, he drank wine all the time.
Whether it was an ingredient or not. Yeah, it was at a British accent, and I can't remember.
He was Australian, I think.
Oh, Australian, okay. He had an accent
Australian,
of some kind.
Yeah. What the heck was his name? I can't think of his name either. So
it'll come to us about.
As I get older, the names disappear.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're doing Harrigan in Ottawa, and how much influence did you have in what was going on with the show?
Oh, I had all the influence.
Yeah.
And we reached a point where one time the guy who wanted us just to do a simple interview show, like introduce cartoons, he came up to us first of all when he saw the pilot. He said, "That's not what I asked for. I want to just..." Anyway, The show went on the air, and about 3 months later, he called us all in, the whole staff and crew, and he said, "I want one answer. Why is this show number 1 in its slot?" And we just looked at him, and the PA said, "Maybe because it's good." And he said, "Okay," and that was the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I tried, after that, I tried to get the show syndicated. He said, no, it's a local show. It's not going to go anywhere, and so forth and so on. And so I was in touch with Lauren. We were still talking, and I came to visit him one time, and
he had moved to Kingston at that point, right?
Yeah, he had moved to Kingston. He was already at CKWS.
Yeah.
And I said, "They don't want to syndicate the show." He says, "Well, bring it here. We'll syndicate it." Okay. So that's what happened. So when CJAI wanted to renew my contract, I asked for an outrageous sum, and they said, "No, you're kidding. We can't give you that." So I said, "Okay, I'm leaving," and that's when I left and came to Kingston.
So the show is in Kingston, and this would be, what, the late 70s? Mid-70s?
No, early 70s.
Early 70s. Okay. And so
at the beginning of the 70s, yeah.
So it gets syndicated across Canada to different markets. How widely was it syndicated?
Right across the country.
Yeah.
From coast to coast. The first people that picked it up was Hamilton, CHCH. I'll never forget that when Lauren came in the office to tell me, CHCH just picked you up. Oh, God. I was so excited. We both were.
They were a big station back then, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the show won awards, too, did it not?
The show, during its play, it won 3 CanPro Awards, which, as some people call it, the Canadian Emmys, which I don't think they exist anymore. I think it's all put into the ACTRA Awards.
Right. Now now the show itself became a family affair, did it not?
Yeah, eventually. Well, what happened is I try to get someone to work with me as a foil, like a young girl that could be, but I tried different people from different universities that were students and everything. They just would not work. There was no relationship.
Yeah.
So I had used my daughter one time in Ottawa on a show, and she was a natural. She grew up in show business. She knew all about it and everything. And she came on, and it just worked, and that's what happened with her.
Yeah.
That's how she became what she was, and she was just great at that, doing that. So we remained with that. And then later on, I decided to put in someone bringing in the mail. And who else would that be but bring it in on a unicycle? And my wife had been a unicycle act for many, many years. So
really?
She came in and brought the mail on her unicycle, and that was it. My wife and my daughter were on the show.
Well, that's the way to do the show. If you all get along, then that's the way to do the show. Yeah.
That's right. But we used to have great fights. But the fights were about production and everything.
Right.
And I think the crew used to get really upset. We weren't fighting each other and killing each other but we would have like arguments on set. So about what we should do and who should do.
Yeah.
But that's usual in any production, I think.
Oh, I would guess so. Yeah. Now, while you were doing the show in Kingston, you were also had other responsibilities at the TV station. And were you still singing outside the station at that point in town?
Yeah, actually, the singing is what kept me alive because the money they were paying me at the station was so minimal. I could never have lived on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know about that. So anyway, I had a band, and first I started there with Tony Friseo, who was well known in the area.
Right.
And we co-led a band for several years, and then I started on my own, and I would do like at least 180 gigs a year. So
really?
I was quite busy with my. Oh yeah.
How far afield would you travel with those?
We would go as far as Montreal and as far as Toronto.
Okay. And 180.
So
that's
that's
half a year. Yeah.
That's right. We did a lot of gigs. Yeah, a lot of gigs for Queen's University, for all kinds, for the Jewish community, for everybody. We did weddings, bar mitzvahs, you name it. We did it all.
Jeez. And you were still performing the same sort of music, right? That you were performing years and years ago when you were in Ottawa at the Gatineau Club. Okay.
Well, we added some rock to it, and I diversified the music. Playlist somewhat so that it would appeal to most people until it really started to get rock and rolly, and I didn't want to do any of that. I was not interested.
Yeah.
And then DJs moved in.
Yes.
And well, that kind of brought music right down to nothing.
Live music was disappearing quickly.
Was killed. Yeah.
Now, I can remember you and I worked together at CKWS. I was upstairs in radio, and you were downstairs in television. And for a while, after a while, I left to pursue a higher paying gig, as it were. And I lost touch with you a little bit, but one day I walked into a pizza parlor and there you were.
That's right.
So
yeah, I remember that. I remember that very well.
So tell me about Godfather's Pizza. That seemed like a big change.
Well, it was a change. Why did I go into a pizza place? Why did I go into anything? Because I couldn't get any employment anywhere.
Okay.
I had bios written by pros, wrote them myself, did them, sent them everywhere, and the answer I got was, "You're overqualified." Every job I applied for, I was overqualified. So I said,
Okay.
"What am I going to do? I've got to do something."
Yeah.
So that's when I decided. My wife and I decided, well, why don't we you've always cooked, so why don't you just get a restaurant of sorts and do that? I said, yeah, that's good.
Yep.
And that opportunity came up, and I took it, and we made pizzas for 12 years, which I did not plan on.
Now,
I thought we'd be there a couple of years, build it up great, turn it over, make a lot of money, and go back to music. You know? But didn't work out that way because the whole economy dipped right then, and you couldn't give away anything. So that's what happened. I was there for 12 years.
Now, was that your franchise, or did you start Godfathers? Yeah. Okay.
No, Godfathers was started in, actually, it's an American franchise.
Okay.
But some Canadian guy in London, Ontario, started it in Canada, and all the time we were in business, he was being sued by the Americans for taking the name and whatever.
Oh.
But anyway, after a while, he just went bankrupt, and so we, through a lot of jiggling with lawyers and stuff, we got all the stuff in our property. So
right.
With the lease and everything, which was in his name, the phone number, all that, we had to go through all that to get him out of there.
Yeah.
And we finally did, but with the one clause that we had to change the name, so it couldn't be Godfather anymore.
Okay.
So I came up with a name. I said, let's make it a gangster name, Godfather.
Yeah.
And that's when I changed it to Godfather. And there was another guy downtown who had a Godfather store, and he changed it too. But he changed it to The Godfather. Okay.
Jeez. The things you have to do.
Oh, unbelievable, Dave! Unbelievable.
Okay, before we move on,
and all this time, all I wanted to do was sing, and here I am making pizzas.
Okay,
but I can't say I didn't enjoy it. I did.
Before we go on any further, I have to ask you a question. What's your favorite pizza?
Well, what I do with pizzas, I buy a cheese pizza.
Yep.
And I don't bother making them anymore.
No.
I could, but people say, why don't you just make it? I don't want to do it. But anyway, I buy a cheese pizza.
Yep.
With extra sauce and a lot of cheese, and I take it home and put all kinds of other vegetables on it.
Okay.
And then I put it in the oven.
So you like a lot of stuff on your pizza?
I like, mostly vegetables.
Yeah.
Yeah. I put some meats,
Yeah.
Whatever I happen to have. I like hot sausages and stuff like that. So
okay.
I'll put that on, yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah, sure. What's your favorite pizza?
I'm a traditionalist. I like the green pepper, the mushrooms, and the pepperoni.
Okay.
Tomato sauce and cheese. Yeah.
That's the big three.
That's right. That's the moneymaker for the pizza parlors, I would guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing pizzas, and you do that for 12 years. How did you get back into music?
Well, there was the Kingston Big Swing Band.
Okay.
Wanted me to sing with them, and that was Paul Chabot was leading it at the time. And he came to my house and said, "You got to come sing with us. You got to come sing with us." I said, "Okay, Paul, I'd be happy to." And that started. Anyway, that's when it started, and then I did some other things with other summer festivals that were going on, and so that's what happened. I got back singing there, and so I would do gigs. I would do some New Year's gigs because they paid exceptionally well while I was at the pizza place.
Yeah.
But every time I left, something happened at the store when I wasn't there. So my wife said, "You cannot leave. You got to be there."
Yeah.
Okay. So that's when I stopped altogether for several years. I didn't sing at all.
Yeah.
I would go to Ottawa if they called me to do some radio with CBC. I would go and do some shows there.
Yeah.
And I did a couple of shows at CJAI called me back to do a couple of shows at that time too. So
So
but very, 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 very little, very few.
we're conducting this conversation with me here in Kingston and you in Arizona. So my question is, how did you get from Kingston to Arizona?
My wife had very severe arthritis, and we came for a trip to Colorado to see her sister, and she felt a million times better, and she says, I want to move out here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what started it. So I was not too anxious. I said, they're going to run out of water here, which is starting to happen. But anyway, that's what happened. And so we bought. We had a summer place in New Hampshire. So in New Hampshire, I went and looked at motorhomes.
Yeah.
And we ended up buying one. And we drove from Kingston, pulling a car. We drove to Arizona, and this was the day after 9/11. We were going to leave 9/11, and I turned TV on while I was waiting for her to get ready, and they went, oh boy, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so that's when we came the day after 9/11. We drove across the border, and I've been here, and I also maintain a residence in Gananoque.
Okay.
I've always had it. So,
Yeah.
So I'm Canadian, believe me.
Yeah. So you picked up music there as well, right? So you've been doing music ever since you moved there?
I didn't pick up music there because I came here.
Yep.
And since I was in the States, I wanted to get enough points to get some Social Security.
Okay.
So I went and I got a job, and I worked for 7 years with back in the food business, back at Pizza. I was with a very big supermarket chain here, and I was with them for 7 years. And then when they said I had enough points, I just said thank you, and I just left and went right back into music. And the funny thing is, there's a very good friend of mine here. His name was Fred Smith.
Okay.
Fred Smith from Houston. And Fred said, I had a lot of friends here, and they had a lot of music. And, I said, why don't you take this tape and give it to them? And it was his barber, actually, who was in music. So I gave him the tape, and he called me an hour later, and he said, is that really you? I said, yeah. He said, which one? Because it was all years different, and my voice changed. So all of them. He says, when can you come over? So I went. We made an appointment, got together, and then I started doing music right away and got back into it. So I worked with small groups and big groups and worked trailer parks and did all kinds of things. But I was singing. I was happy as hell. So.
Oh, yeah. And you're still singing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, singing quite a bit. Now, I sing now. I directed an orchestra here in Sun City, the Rhythm Ramblers. I was the musical director for 10 years. And then politics got into it, and I don't live in Sun City, so that kind of disintegrated. And but I sing with other bands, and I sing not as much as I used to, but I do. I've got a regular gig once a month at the Elks Club in Scottsdale, and we do with the band. We do a lot of other gigs, New Year's Eve and different dances and things like that. And I also work with. Well, you can probably see this on YouTube. I do some things with the Swing Kings.
Right, the Arizona Swing Kings.
And it's a really, really good big band, big pro musicians, and exceptional band. And so I do a lot of gigs with them, and that's what's keeping me busy here, and that's what's keeping me alive, music.
Tell me something about your thoughts on the popularity of, for lack of a better name, the Great American Songbook. All of these big songs from way back when. Why are they still so popular? Because
that's music. What they call music today is not even close.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most music today is made up of 3 bars. That's it. If you know 3 bars, I see it on TV all the time. Learn these 3 chords, and you can play any song.
That's right.
That's what music is today. I'm sure you're aware of that, Dave.
Yeah,
You're in the business. You know what's going on. But the music of those, like the Cole Porters and the Gershwins and people like that music that'll live forever as long as there's music alive on our planet. That music will still be there.
Do you have
music? And
Go ahead.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
Do you have a sense as to why somebody like Michael Bublé is as popular as he is? Because that's what he plays, right?
He's doing that music.
Yep.
He's doing music. He does some rock things, but they're still very, very musical.
Yeah.
No, he's got a really good thing going, and he's a wonderful performer and a fine singer. So I mean, and he's got a really good personality. So there's no reason he wouldn't be successful. And he's young, and he's got the young girls screaming for him like Sinatra. So, who can ask for anything more?
Now I have to put a plug in for the Big Fat Horn Band. It's a Kingston band, and they've been around for 10 years. They just celebrated 10 years, and they have trumpets, and they have trombones and saxophones. Like, they have the big combination with a singer as well. And whenever you get back up to town, to your place in Gananoque, if you haven't heard them, then I would suggest that you try and take the time to catch them, because they do a great show. But it's all that kind of music. And they do some rock stuff as well, but they put it in the big band format. And
that sounds really good. I've never heard of them.
Oh yeah, they don't have any records or anything, but they do a gig once a month, every month at a club in town, and they have a lot of fans. And I've had the opportunity to catch them a few times. Let me ask you this question: if you look back, and I probably already know the answer to this, who's your favorite singer?
Well, I have a few. Well, of course, Frank Sinatra, because he was the master.
Mm-hmm.
Mel Torme.
Yep.
Jack Jones. Nat Cole. These were all great singers.
Yep.
Great singers. And someone that does not get enough recognition of how great he really was Matt Munro.
Okay. I'm not as familiar with
He's one of my
this.
favorites.
Yeah.
Matt Munro is English. He's from England.
Yep.
And he was huge all over the world. Huge. But he was not. Whenever he had a hit, like "Portrait of My Love" that Steve Lawrence did,
okay,
that was stolen from Matt Munro. Matt had the hit all over the world, but in the States, Steve they would take the songs from France or England and transport them to America with an American name, and it wasn't a foreign song anymore. It was American now, and that's what they used to do.
Marketing. Yep.
Well, absolutely. American marketing. Yeah.
Favorite song that you sing?
God, I could never tell you that. I could never tell you. I have so many favorites, Dave. One of my first and early favorites is "The Nearness of You."
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, that I don't know if you're familiar with that song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of these songs I remember from years ago when I used to play them at the station long time ago. And do you find that your taste in songs has changed over the years? Like, you have a certain repertoire of songs, and have you moved songs in and moved songs out of that repertoire?
They're all of the same genre, usually. I do some rock stuff.
Yeah.
When I'm doing a dance or something, we'll do some rock.
Yeah.
In my regular shows, when I do shows, I do things like Leroy Brown, which is kind of a rock thing.
Yeah.
And stuff of that nature, but not rock with three chords. I don't do any 3-chord music.
It has to have at least 4.
At least.
Well, Barry, it's obvious that you still remain passionate about the music, and I certainly appreciate you giving me some time today to chat, and all the best to you, and take care. Thank you very much.
You too, Dave. Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you, and my love to everybody in Kingston.
Okay. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Again, a special thank you to my guest, Barry Dale, a.k.a. Harrigan. This episode was recorded over the phone from his home in Arizona in September 2023. To those of you who have downloaded and listened to this episode, thank you. And I'll be back soon with another conversation.
The theme music for the podcast is Stasis Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to thekingstonianpodcast@gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.